Good morning, councillors. Good morning, executive. Good morning to our guests, including those joining us in the gallery, and I'll introduce our visiting Reverend in a moment. And to those joining us in the digital gallery, it's my privilege to declare the ordinary meeting of Tuesday the 18th of April 2023 open. And in so doing, I would also pause and acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet and across which our magnificent region is formed. And I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Congratulate them on ongoing nurture of culture across this magnificent region. Councillors, I note we now have full attendance of councillors for today's meeting and a full attendance of the executive team. Therefore, I have no apologies for today's meeting. We do come forward to item 4, which is prayers, and it's an honour to welcome Reverend Bruce Raymond to join us this morning from Burnafasfern Uniting Church. Bruce, thank you for taking the time to join us in person. You're the first to come in person for quite some time, and we're honoured to have you with us, and I hand over to you to lead us in prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just switch the microphone on because this gets broadcast. Thank you.
So once again, thank you, Mayor, and good morning to councillors and to all the members of the public as well. Good morning. In 1971, when I returned from Vietnam, my father said to me, I read in the paper, he said, we're in 20 years' time, by then there'll be a computer in every household. And I said, what do you want a computer for? Only a fortnight ago, in a weekend newspaper, there was this article, Robo staff are here, and it talks about a gentleman who's pushing his own barrow concerning the development of human robots. And he says this, that it will soon be impossible to distinguish a real person to, say, a digital something or other. Most people have a low idea of how quickly our technology is moving. It's really exciting. Then a comment from Mike Seymour, who is the senior lecturer at the University of Sydney, says that digital humans are already used in some workplaces. He goes on to talk about digital humans are not superhumans. They are no cleverer than us. There's a difference between the sci-fi and the reality. You're not going to have a robotic nurse speaking to mum. He said that's impractical and silly. That's just fairy tale stuff. Digital humans will have significant benefits in the workplace. And he goes on to talk about trainee doctors working on human robots, as well as digital humans engaging with people who have memory impediments. And I guess there's an allusion there to people suffering all sorts of cognitive dissonance. So this is what's happening. Within 20 years, we had computers in the house. These experts are telling us within 5 years, we're going to have robots, which will be as commonplace as computers are today. Folks, that leaves you with some enormous challenges in the days to come. And so I really find it's essential, and I thank you for the opportunity to lead you in prayer this morning. Let's pray. Now, in the high altitudes of accountability, Lord God, I pray that you'll grant these good people here this morning a sincerity in their roles of service in the communities which each of them serve. May integrity be a living experience, with self-honesty being ever present. Afford them patience with each other and themselves, as well as the citizens they serve. In their decision-making processes, Lord God, may they demonstrate a universal wisdom that will be recognised and appreciated by all. Guide them through the labyrinths of delays, distractions and temptations which they are bound to confront. And in their heated disagreement, grant them your grace in the wake, so that they may continue to serve in the ways that you have called them to. Forgive them, Lord, when self-image morphs into self-indulgence, when avarice is disguised as ambition, when efficiency is reduced to economy, and when sincerity is based on reasoning, and when relationships are a little more than getting a job done. Lord, watch over these good people, not just day by day, not just hour by minute, and not by hour by hour, but by minute. In these things we ask in your mighty name. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's been much appreciated.
Yes.
You are welcome to stay with us for the morning, but if you have other duties, we also respect and understand that. And thank you for your leadership contribution in our community.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, if you would excuse me, my beloved computer calls me now. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Councillors, we could have emailed them. So, councillors, we move forward to item 5 now, today's agenda. I've not been advised of any declarations of prescribed or declarable conflicts of interest, but I pause again if there are any belated notifications. If not, we move on to item 6. There are no announcements or mayoral minutes for today's meeting. Item 7, there are also no notified deputations or petitions to bring forward today. So we therefore come to item 8, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. And councillors, we have a recommendation before us that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 4th of April 2023 be adopted. I seek a mover. Councillor West, thank you.
I'm happy to move, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions to the minutes? You've had access to review and so forth. If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor McInnes, wish to speak, Councillor?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else seeking leave to speak? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Any business arising, CEO?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Any business arising, councillors? Councillor Hay?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I hark back to the ordinary meeting of the 24th of January 2023, where the issue of the provision of costs for the appeal against the pig and calf sale yards heritage listing was mentioned, and you stated that the matter would be dealt with at a future ordinary meeting. I'm just wondering if we could be provided with an update on the progress of providing that information, please.
Noting its question without notice, is there any ability, CEO, to provide an update?
General Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CEO. Yes, I'm aware officers are working on that report as we speak. It's planned to be back in front of council. My plan would be that we'll be back in front of council within 6 weeks, pending other urgent matters that those staff have been dealing with over that period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. CEO, you wish to add?
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Mayor, please be aware there is an amount placed in the Capital Works program in the draft Capital Works budget that's going out to consultation, so there's an amount in there for some of the rehabilitation of the pig and calf sale.
I'm aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. Any other matters, councillors? If not, we move forward and we come to the consideration of the business today. We come to item, we come into the executive section, and CEO, you have an update for me? Just a moment.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I wish to have one of the reports, 10.3, removed from the agenda.
Thank you, CEO, for that advice, and that'll be dealt with at a future date. We progress then, noting that we now have item 10.1 before us, and that's the tabling of the report. You introduce the cover report.
Through Mr Mayor, there is a cover report there with a recommendation that Council note the attached post-mission report of the Council of Mayors South East Queensland's North American mission undertaken to 11 February 2023.
Thank you. Councillors, it's quite a comprehensive report. Are there any questions to the report for clarity at this point in time? Councillor West? Sorry to hear about. I've got the CEO still on. Councillor West, we'll try that.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wondered if there was sort of just a very quick synopsis of the standout places you visited or aspects that would pertain to the Scenic Rim, please, moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor. With 120-something pages, I guess my first observation, this was in my view, a spectacularly effective and successful experience sponsored by the Council of Mayors and working with both San Francisco and LA in the US and then into Vancouver in Canada. I've been on a number of study tours through my business life, and this certainly was well up there in terms of learnings and opportunities. Like every study tour, you learn the good, the bad, and the things you never want to have to cope with in Australia or in your community. Certainly, the highlight of the trip is the reinforcement and the demonstrated capacity of Metro Vancouver. That's formed with 23 entities, including 21 councils, and then a couple of other unique entities that exist in Canada. They've been collaborating for quite a long period of time, and their model of collaboration is exceptionally mature. And probably the highlight of it is their planning of all aspects for the collective council areas exists as a minimum at 2050 and beyond. And they're focused on collaborative outcomes that ensure they have sustainable economy, sustainable environment and sustainable social fabric over that time. And therefore it's a very integrated approach right across all of the aspects of planning, from land use planning to environmental planning to waste management and housing development, transport development. It's a very sophisticated model that really emphasises a model that in their world is more effective than perhaps what their province, their state has been providing, and certainly sets a shining example of what should be possible through things like the Regional Planning Committee in South East Queensland, and certainly has, for myself and the other mayors, reinforced the absolute importance of planning to the long term. I think the highlight there is that they have stepped up to the hard challenges and made it clear that there is a price to pay for achieving that. And I don't think Vancouver's noted as the cheapest place to live, but it is a place where people understand the importance of not that you have to pay to get where you want to be. I think the highlight perhaps in San Francisco was absolutely around the experience with WISC. WISC being the automated aerial transport system, with effectively the drone public transport system, 4-seater prototype now in play. It was a delight to witness the prototype flying. I believe they've now completed something like 700 flights without intervention. This technology is seen as a transformational step forward in the safety of transport compared to the likes of helicopters because of the levels of built-in redundancy in the systems, and has the opportunity to they're aiming to be at the affordability level of an Uber for that range of transport. For me, this was an exciting technology which from day one I've seen the possibility of for a region like ours with widely distributed communities, with no access to public transport to speak of, with difficult road networks mostly that will never be able to be upgraded to the levels of efficiency that other places are experiencing. This offers an opportunity for people to age in place and have easy access to connect to the services to support life, social services, medical services, shopping, within a very short flight. And if I look at the example from their modelling, the potential, for example, is from somewhere a Boona takeoff to be at a Springfield station in less than 15 minutes to connect into a real public transport network is just one example of many that we've looked at. It's still working through the approval process, but certainly the FAA in the US are very excited by the technology. And as you know, our goal is to have that technology proven, tested and available in southeast Queensland by the end of this decade, which I do think offers great opportunity for our region. Another highlight certainly in Los Angeles, to see their early preparation for hosting yet another Olympic, Paralympic, with all of their venues pretty much in place, and sensational venues that we saw, all privately funded venues that exist, and certainly it's a different model that they have in place. So that's probably some of the highlights. There are lessons to learn. We did experience some right-in-your-face examples, particularly in a couple of locations in United States, of what happens when social fabric fails. The extent of poverty, homelessness was quite excruciating and was quite specific right into their city centres. And the challenge that certainly was seen in LA is the struggle to get people back onto their public transport post-COVID means that their road network has returned to those reputed challenging traffic jams of the 70s and 80s, and getting people past that mindset is something that they're really, really struggling with. So, you know, certainly for me, one of the highlights was to see where the different areas had advanced in their management of circular economy, zero waste and environmental issues, which you know I'm quite passionate about. And certainly they've got a long history and are far more advanced than we are in their waste management systems, both in their education of their community, their expectation of their community, and their limitation of products in their communities, and their commitment to preserving critical environmental precincts whilst balancing growth was to be applauded. As a major housing provider in their communities, their structure for providing future housing is to go up because they're landlocked, but they're doing that adjacent to high performance rail transit corridors, and they're not providing for individual parking spaces in those facilities, so that they're pushing people into the reliance on public transport to make that transformational cultural change. So that's probably a short version, but I obviously found it a very productive. I think there are a lot of lessons for us, a lot of challenge for us to continue in our discussions, both at a state level, to ensure through the preparation of the next regional plan, for instance, that the needs for the right infrastructure to create local jobs so that we actually have affordable livability rather than giving people a cheap house but an expensive lifestyle, having to travel away for work. Those sorts of things need to really figure strongly in this next regional plan. Thank you for the question. Any other points for clarification, councillors? If not, I'll ask the CEO to introduce the recommendation.
Through Mr Mayor, the recommendation is that Council note the attached post-mission report of the Council of Mayors South East Queensland's North American Mission undertaken 2 to 11 February 2023.
Thank you. I seek a mover. Councillor Enright, thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell, thank you. You wish to speak, Councillor Enright?
Thank you, Mayor. Only to say thank you for that overview. The report was very extensive, and I think it is important that we do observe what opportunities are out there in the community, but also what challenges that we also have to be equally aware of. So I see that that was very good value in providing that mission, largely sponsored by the Council of Mayors South East Queensland. So time well spent, I'd suggest.
Thank you. Councillor, anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move forward to item 10.2, and again, that's on page 130. Like I said, there was a big report. And I ask the CEO to introduce.
Through Mr Mayor, this is a report that relates to the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly. This is the 29th year the Assembly has been held. The Assembly involves the congregation, or the coming together of a large amount of local government authorities from across Australia. There is usually a time for both the ministers and the shadow ministers to talk to those that are there, and there are of course the motions that have been put forward by the different local government authorities. At this stage, I do not have a copy of all the local government members' motions. They have not been finalised at this point in time. So there is a request there that Councillor Jeff McConnell attend the Australian Local Government Association from the 13th to the 16th of June 2023.
Thank you. CEO, are there any questions for clarification to this report, councillors? Councillor Enright?
Through you, Mayor, question to the CEO. Is this something that Scenic Room Council has participated in previously?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I probably haven't been here long enough to understand. I believe that there would be councillors more equipped at the table to answer that question.
Councillor West?
CEO, through you, Mayor. I understand back in Beaudesert days that councillors did not always attend, but it was certainly a conference that was attended from time to time.
Okay.
Could I ask
Thank
the
you.
Mayor, have you attended in your term?
No, councillor, I haven't. I don't think we've had anyone attend since 2016. And again, that's largely, I guess, driven by where the balance of effort needed to be, or the balance of priorities was in terms of benefit for the region over that period of time. Further question,
No,
Councillor Knight?
through you, Mayor, to the CEO. Was there a budget item provided for in the current year?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, the budget is picked up in general professional development and training area.
And I note in the report, through you, Mayor,
Mm-hmm.
to the CEO, I note in the report that it comes from an account for Mayor and Councillor expenses, I think it is. Or, can you tell me what the balance of that account is?
I believe I did send you an email in relation to what the balance was, and off the top of my head, I think it's around about the 300. If this was to be subtracted, it's around about the 300 mark. But I'm relying off memory that the email I sent you either yesterday.
Thank
Have you got that email there?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I think the balance is 2,700. Yep. So
So can I just clarify? You're saying the current balance is 2,700. Thank you. Thank you. Further questions, councillors? Councillor Enright?
further to the question, that the current balance of this is insufficient to cover the cost of the proposed costs. And would that mean that that account would be in deficit, or we'd have to find the costs elsewhere, and then would that not provide any additional costs for the rest of the financial year?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'll go to the General Manager, Council Sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, and through you, Chair. Any decision that emanates from this would be considered and ratified through the March budget review. So a decision of council effectively will provide the direction for officers to accommodate the necessary budgets and ratified through the March budget process.
Thank you. Further points of Councillor Enright?
Further question, Mayor. Thank you. Through you. I note that it clashes with a fairly important, or perhaps the most important meeting of council, and that being the budget meeting. I understand that there is an opportunity for Councillor McConnell to log in. Is there additional cost involved in that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to direct the Deputy Mayor to go to a Wi-Fi area that's usually at the conference and step away from the conference. In my experience, they usually put up a Wi-Fi, and he'd have connectivity through the device he has right there.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I might. I'll get the CEO to introduce the recommendation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is as follows: that Council authorise Councillor Jeff McConnell to attend the Australian Local Government Association's 29th National General Assembly to be held from 13 to 16 June 2023, and Council consent to Councillor Jeff McConnell exercising voting rights that reflect Council's adopted policies and strategies.
Seeker mover. Councillor Chalk. Further questions? Certainly, probably a question, if I may, to Councillor McConnell. Could you share with the floor what you see as the economic benefits to the Scenic Rim from your participation, or the particular benefits to the function of council, given the balance with noted with the budget meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for providing that question. By having a small council, we are restricted in our professional development. We only have a small budget, and over the last... I'm just trying to bring up... No, here we are. Over the last 12 months, I've tried to, since becoming the Deputy Mayor, tried to ensure that I've got the best knowledge possible to provide the service required to the residents of the Scenic Rim. And in that 12 months, I've attended the LGAQ protocols for council meetings, chairing council meetings, de-escalating aggressive behaviour, the Queensland Treasury Corporation, economic essentials for elected officials, financial decision making for the public sector, and the service planning for councillors, as well as the LGA conference. I think attending these conferences provide councillors with the opportunity to network with fellow councillors across Australia and garner ideas from other councils on how they progress issues, especially for us smaller councils where we have a restricted rate base. And I think attending this will provide myself and then council ultimately with additional information and ways of providing a service to our ratepayers. I don't think it's excessive, and if there's any issues with the extra, I think it's $400 that is outside the budget. I'm happy to stiff that if that's such a pressing issue for other councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further, Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. Through your question to Councillor McConnell, Councillor McConnell, can you tell me which of the 6 key topics you would see benefit in your role as councillor?
I thank Councillor Enright for his question. I think all of the 8 topics that are there, that 8 priority areas that were called by the ALGA, those being productivity, local government infrastructure, community wellbeing, local government workforce, data, digital technology and cyber security, climate change and renewable energy, natural disasters and housing are all important in our area. I'll start at the top, obviously productivity. There's 9 ways local government can contribute to the productivity of a broader economy, and they're all listed in the report. And they're all ones that we look at when we're building our budget. Local government infrastructure is a major one. There's major issues with capital works and the cost blowouts across Australia. Community wellbeing has to do with our environmental base and how we allow development to occur in our growth management strategy to ensure that the developments we're putting in and the way we are master planning each of our townships don't allow for additional social issues that may arise. The local government workforce, we all know there's an issue with employment within the local government, and that is across Australia. They're being poached from all over, and I think it's already been reported we're well down on our workforce at the moment, trying to encourage people and keep people in our workforce. We're fortunate that our new manager, I don't think he's here, a new manager for IT is across the data, digital technology and cyber security. We've seen what happens with cyber security across not only the government but also the private sector in regards to incursions. Climate change and renewable energy. As you know, I'm on the LGAQ forum group for climate change. Natural disasters, we've had our fair share since before 2011, but 2011, 2013, 2017, 2019, and again early last year. So I'm in that area as well. And then housing comes back to our growth management strategy to ensure that we have enough social housing and that our developments that we put in have all the right tools to enable our social and environmental assets to enrich the residents of the Scenic Rim. So all of those are especially relevant to everything the Scenic Rim has been doing over the last 4 years at least.
Thank you for the response. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I'll seek a seconder. Councillor McInnes. Councillor Chalk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I really thank Councillor McConnell for his response to them questions, and I look forward to getting back the learnings of this trip and probably just seeing the value that is in it for future years and whether we plan to send delegates down there. So I look forward to hearing his report. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. I will speak against this. While professional development and personal development is important, I don't doubt that, I'm not sure that this is the forum that provides that. I did ask Councillor McConnell for his response or his involvement in his role of councillor for the topics, and really I see these items were probably more relevant for officers when you talk about cybersecurity and the likes. Council is not responsible for housing. And there's a lot of processes that are already in place regarding climate change. So I do question the benefit to the region for his attendance at this National General Assembly when we have a very active and more relevant local government of Queensland Association of Queensland, but particularly when it clashes with the most significant meeting in the special meeting for our budget. I would think that attendance physically here would be a higher priority.
Anyone else wishing to speak for the motion? Councillor McInnes.
Yes, yes, Mayor, I will speak for it. The big majority of us go to the Queensland local government conferences, and there's times when I'm sure quite a number of us have said, well, how much did we get out of it? And there's always something there, but I think this is a good step that we actually see what type of conference it is, and maybe we one or two go to that in future rather than all going to the Queensland conference. It's and it's good to mix with different people there, and that's what I get out of a lot of these conferences more than anything else. Finding how different people do the things that we do from a day-to-day basis, and we can learn from other people's views. So I think it's a good idea, and like Councillor Chalk said, I think I look forward to the Councillor McConnell's views when he comes back from the conference.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone else seeking leave to speak to the motion? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Really just what has been said, but just to reiterate, in this term, this Council of Scenic and Regional Council, there have been no delegates going to this conference, so I think it's opportune for someone to go, have a look and see how this is, whether it's applicable to us or not, and I look forward to Councillor McConnell's report on his return. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Chalk, you wish to close?
No, thank you, Mayor.
We put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried.
Division, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Division 1, 2, 3, 5 and 6 in favour. Against, Mayor and Division 4. We move on to item 10.4 on page 155 of today's agenda. And GM Custom Regional Prosperity, I'll ask you to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors, those in the gallery and those listening online. Item 10.4 before you today is the Scenic Rim Nature-Based Tourism Strategy 2023 to 2032. Most councillors will be aware that we have been working on this strategy for a number of years now, and with the sole aim of Scenic Rim becoming one of the leading destinations for nature-based tourism. You would also be aware from previous briefings that the Australian Government Building Better Regions Fund investment stream round 3 funded this development of this strategy with funding matched by council, and it was aimed to capitalise on the region's opportunity for adventure and nature-based tourism. This strategy is also in alignment with the state-based strategy developed by Tourism Events Queensland, the Nature-Based Strategy 21 to 24, and Brisbane Economic Development Agency's Visitor Economy Plan for 2031. I acknowledge Councillor Hay will not have had an opportunity to have been party to those previous briefings, and I'd make an offer that we would welcome an opportunity with our team to give you a one-on-one briefing and go through the strategy in depth. But overall, the goal of this strategy has been achieved by creating transformational nature-based visitor experiences, building a sustainable tourism industry and businesses, and attracting and enriching the lives of other visitors. Over the years that we've been developing this strategy, we've heard loud and clear that this is an important piece of work to manage tourism numbers, to not drive over tourism, and to maintain the sustainability and viability of the region by not undermining the very thing that is critically important to the survival of the Scenic Rim. I have with me today a couple of officers. I have the Principal Specialist for Regional Prosperity, Julia Smith, and we have Susan Packer, who is our Coordinator of Destination Management, and I'd ask Susan if she would go through some highlights of the strategy to Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As General Manager has just highlighted, the Scenic Rim Nature-Based Tourism Strategy 2023 to 2032 has been developed with two key aims. Firstly, to establish the Scenic Rim as the preeminent destination for nature-based tourism in Queensland by 2032, and also to ensure, and particularly to ensure, that our natural places are shared and protected for the enjoyment, the appreciation and the benefit of locals and visitors. Very much that dual audience in mind. This goes beyond simply attracting more visitors to the Scenic Rim. The strategy focuses on achieving a higher commercial yield from visitors by improving the opportunities for those visitors to pay to have better visit experiences in nature, and also providing opportunities, of course, for them to, as we always like in tourism, to stay longer, to stay across the region, away from hotspots, and also to spread that dispersal across the seasons as well. The strategy supports the region's broader regional prosperity objectives in increasing the value of tourism to the regional economy by creating local jobs and the sustainability of the region's economy and lifestyle. Through economic modelling, we have been able to indicate that by 2032, an additional 285,000 visitors will have participated in nature-based experiences in the region. An additional nearly $40 million in visitor expenditure will be generated for the region, with 167 new jobs created and over 200,000 visitor nights created for local accommodation businesses. As many councillors will know, tourism is a very important industry sector for the Scenic Rim, second only to agriculture. We have over 500 businesses in the region that are directly or indirectly working in the tourism sector. 1 in 10 people in the region, again, are directly or indirectly employed in this sector as well. Nature-based tourism is one of the Scenic Rim's greatest competitive advantages. The region has 6 national parks, which are obviously, as we know, in easy proximity to 3 very large and growing urban areas, being Ipswich, the Gold Coast and Brisbane. And 4 of these national parks are part of the Gondwana Rainforest of Australia complex and are also UNESCO World Heritage listed. The region has over a dozen businesses that are certified with Ecotourism Australia, including iconic ecotourism businesses such as O'Reilly's, Binnaburra and Mount Barney Lodge. That dozen businesses that we have benchmarked across other LGAs of comparable size across Australia, we have almost double the number of ecotourism certified businesses than most other LGAs. So we are seen as a leader in this area already. And that is also represented in the visitation to the region. Visitors are already choosing to come to the region in record numbers for nature experiences. The region experienced double the growth in nature-seeking visitors than the rest of Queensland and Australia over the 5 years leading up to the COVID pandemic. So this strategy helps the region to manage their behaviour. prevent overcrowding and contribute to the sustainable management of the region's economy and lifestyle. The strategy is aligned to the Scenic Rim's regional prosperity strategy. It is also aligned clearly to Tourism and Events Queensland, the state tourism organisation's nature-based tourism strategy, and to our regional tourism organisation, Brisbane Economic Development Agency's Visitor Economy Plan. It also aligns to Scenic Rim's agri-tourism roadmap, and with those two strategy helps to replace the former general tourism strategy that was closed out earlier this year. Council secured successfully, as has been mentioned, Council successfully secured funding from the Australian Government towards the development of this strategy in recognition of the adventure and nature tourism opportunities already prevalent in the region. Council took a very measured approach in developing the strategy over a number of years, commencing in 2019 with a comprehensive review of the region's nature-based tourism operators, a gap assessment of businesses in the region, a workshop with 18 local businesses in the Scenic Rim Adventure Tourism Reference Group, followed by an analysis of visitor data, a further stakeholder workshop, and community consultation conducted in June 2021, at which over 50 pieces of individual pieces of advice and comment were provided, all of which have been addressed within the strategy. Consultation has also been significantly undertaken with our local tourism organisation, Destination Scenic Rim, with our RTO and state tourism organisation, BEDA and TEQ, or Tourism and Events Queensland, and also with government bodies working in this sector, Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport, Department of Environment and Science, SEQ Water and Ecotourism Australia. The strategy, and in conclusion, the strategy focuses on achieving a higher commercial yield from visitors rather than merely attracting more visitors. This will be achieved by improving opportunities for visitors to stay longer and participate in guided and supported experiences, and by encouraging the dispersal of visitors across the region and across the seasons. Thank you.
Thank you. A very comprehensive introduction. Councillors, you've got the full report there in front of you. Any questions for clarification to the report? Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through the chair to the GM, if I could, how does this strategy work with or against the planning scheme in relation to developments of tourism businesses?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Officers that are involved in the planning scheme and strategic planning and the planning and development team have had input into the development of this strategy. What this does is help inform those officers of potential changes that may need to be envisaged in the planning scheme in the future, but also has assisted operators that have been consulted throughout this process to put forward any concerns that they have in navigating the planning scheme in order to deliver on some of the vision that's provided for within the strategy. So it's a great tool to guide both those processes, and it enables us to ensure that what is being envisaged is achievable for the region.
Thank you.
Further questions for clarity to the report, councillors? Councillor McInnes.
Yes, Mayor, through you to the GM. We heard in the introduction there the federal government putting money in. I just wonder whether there was anything from our local operators who stand to benefit from this significantly, whether there was any financial support from the local operators.
In the development of the strategy, if I could clarify? Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. No, there was no physical cash provided by any of the operators, but they did commit many hours and hours of their time at no cost to us as a council on the reference group and the many workshops that were held in developing the strategy. I think the other thing that's important to note is we held an Escape in the Scenic Rim festival. It was on the back of the support council provided to Binavara for the first year of the Gondwana festival, and some of that was actually those operators being able to test the validity of the expansion of the notion of nature-based and adventure tourism. And so they've committed in time, effort and energy, but no one's committed cash outside of council and the grant that we received.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Chalk?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, look, we have a lot of strategies at council already. How are council planning to fund implementation of this strategy?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. There is currently funds sitting within the operational budget that sits under Julie's remit. I'm just going to the budget section. The strategy is allocated $75,000 in 22-23 council budget year to commence implementation of the actions, and as we've said, we've taken a very measured approach with this, so not all of that funding has been utilised at this point in time, because until we have this adoption. However, I know the team have a number of actions that are prepared, ready to go, so there's likely to be some savings in this financial year, and if my memory serves me correctly, there is money being allocated in the draft 23-24 budget for implementation of year-on-year. So the first tranche of actions that will be allocated to 23-24 has already been accounted for in that draft budget. Councillors will recall that the approach that our portfolio takes is that these strategies, as implemented year on year, we're reporting back to you with report cards of what's been achieved and implemented. And the budget sits against each of those strategies in our operational budgets year on year. Only extraordinary actions within those budgets would bring forward a new initiative should that be required in any one of those budget years.
Thank you. Councillor Chalk, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Mayor. Mentioned in this strategy is to attract people to our national parks in the region. A lot of these areas have no facilities or planned budgets like toilets, car parks. How's this strategy going to address that need by attracting people to these areas where there is no infrastructure?
We have good relationships with the senior rangers in most of the national parks and work with them to ensure that we are not sending visitors somewhere where the facilities are undercooked or inadequate or unserviced. And the strategy, one of the actions that was taken in 2021 was to extend the strategy to a 10-year time frame, partly to lead us up to the Olympic Games, but also to provide that longer window to ensure that a proper analysis is done of where those opportunities are across the region for development, to work with DTIS and DES, of course QPWS, to ensure that the planning can be undertaken to focus, to identify and then focus on those trailheads or those car parks or those facilities that are required within national parks and other public land, to make sure that the visitor facilities provided are suitable and are not just causing more pressure in places where we don't need it, you know, where there is already over tourism.
Thanks for clarification. Councillor Chalk, you have a further question?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Does council have any ability to capture any revenue by this strategy through our own finances to address the impacts this will have on our infrastructure, like roads and facilities?
Well, we don't have the ability to collect any revenue in relation to entries to parks and the like, because we don't own those spaces. I guess we'd be, as we see our tourism operators grow, we would be receiving benefit through the rate system for those operations that, as we've seen in recent times, there's been a number of submissions through development assessment for changes of use and for growth in facilities across the region, and through that process we collect fee for service for those assessments, and then of course the rates that are subsequently applied to those businesses for that growth.
Thank you for that response. Councillor McConnell?
Yeah, just to follow on, if I could, through the chair to the GM, in relation to accommodation and nature-based tourism, is there a difference between strictly accommodation and nature-based tourism?
So nature-based tourism is an activity in nature. So accommodation, depending on where it sits, could be either with immersed in nature. So O'Reilly's, Mount Barney, Binnaburra were great examples that are already ecotourism accredited operators. But the motel that's sitting up the road here, that is en route to the Kerry Valley, one of the most beautiful places in the region, is an accommodation that would facilitate an activity in nature. So any of the accommodation across the region could potentially be facilitating nature-based tourism depending on the activities of the visitors. And I think that's the key point that Susan pointed out earlier. The strategy is aiming to get visitors to stay longer, linger longer and spend more. So there are a lot of visitors that come through this region that stay for a night and then head off elsewhere. If they stayed for 3 nights or 4 nights or just 2 nights, the change in yield to the region and the throughput to the local economy would increase exponentially. So any of the facilities that are operating across the region that give people access to the nature-based activities, parks, etc., are contributing to the nature-based tourism strategy implementation.
Thanks for that clarification. Sorry, Councillor McConnell, you have another question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to follow on from that, it seems a slippery slope that anything that facilitates tourism or any nature-based tourism is included. It just seems that I'm trying to separate between proper nature-based tourism, which has walks, activities, and an accommodation that just has a view or maybe some beehives or some orange trees. Is there I've just read on page 164 of the report, the definition of what is nature-based tourism. And it seems to be very broad-based, that it could include anything if it's got a view. And and I'm going back to the planning scheme, so how do we separate nature-based tourism from a commercial activity that calls itself nature-based tourism?
Sorry, can I ask Councillor Hay to turn off, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So the definition, as you pointed out on page 164, is that nature-based tourism is leisure travel undertaken largely or solely for the purpose of enjoying natural attractions and engaging in nature-based experience. It can range from simple natural encounters to more immersive ecotourism experiences where being in nature is the key driver for the experience. So not preempting what tourists have on their bucket list or in their minds when they're searching for an experience, an immersion in nature could be simply driving to Tamborine Mountain for lunch on Sunday, which I did last week. It could be driving to the ropes course and immersing myself in an adventure experience, or it could be staying in accommodation where I get to come out into the morning fresh air amongst the trees and have an immersion experience in nature. There are multiple layers of industry operators here, as you pointed out. So it could be something that is a Mount Barney hike for the more experienced, or it could be soaking in a spa in O'Reilly's, or it could be just a restful sleep with the sound of the birds as you go to sleep at night. So nature-based tourism is about immersion in nature, at people's pace, doing whatever they find is relaxing in nature. It could be a BMX ride, it could be a horse ride, it could be playing a game of polo, or it could be simply breakfast amongst the trees. It's difficult for us to be estimating what a visitor might envisage to be their form of nature-based experience. Ecotourism, though, as it points out here, is ecologically sustainable tourism with a primary focus on experiencing natural areas that foster environmental, cultural understanding, appreciation and conservation. councillors will know that we were funded by the WWF for ecotourism destination accreditation for our destination, which we are still working on. And then we've achieved a subsequent grant to deliver that project as well. Adventure tourism, though, as you rightfully pointed out, is a more niche, nature-based tourism adventure which involves exploration or travel and connection with nature with a certain degree of risk and adventure, which may require special skills and physical exertion, the ropes course, the more experienced hikes, etc. So this is very, very layered. But the very nature of the makeup of this region, as was rightfully pointed out by officers, gives us an edge over most other destinations that we are competing with. People are already wanting to experience what the Scenic Rim has. This is about properly managing and balancing that with the need for sustainability of what we love so much about this region. This is not about loving this region to death. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Hay, you had a question?
Thank you. Through the chair to the GM. I note that at page 175 there's reference to unlocking our potential, and I just make an observation that for a business operator to unlock their potential often equates to a disadvantage and impacts on amenity for rate-paying residents. They do seem to have been somewhat lost in this strategy. I'm concerned about that. And a question, on page 182 at item 1.3.1, there's a mention of undertaking an assessment of existing accommodation and bed stock, as well as current levels of demand to determine where and what style of additional accommodation is appropriate. We've already got 2 nature-based tourism developments proposed on the mountain. One's before the Planning and Environment Court and the other one's heading that way. They're both in Division 2.
Councillor, just a bit of guidance.
Question?
Did you have
Yes.
a question, please? You can do the rest of your commentary later. Please
Question?
maintain respect for process.
Thank you. The question is, what does council, it says here that the lead in this would be council, what does council intend to do in undertaking an assessment of the existing accommodation? My observation on that, just to fill that out, to make the question more sensible, is that there is an absolute proliferation of Airbnbs on the mountain that are not accounted for anywhere. So if you don't have the starting point, how do you determine the need?
Thank you for the multiple questions there, Councillor. I'll start with the first one on the first page reference. This strategy, I think, as the officer pointed out, is also about locals immersing themselves across the region in their own community. So we would love every day from someone from Tamborine Mountain to experience the wonderful gems that we have in our west and vice versa. So it's also about that education piece. To the point around the audit that you mentioned on page 182, item 1.3.1, that will be a starting point. So we understand now the current operators and most of what they have, but this is a formalised audit taking into consideration where the growth opportunities might be, so that when we field inquiries that come through the DA area, through our concierge service that the economic development team operate by shadowing and working with developers or people that are looking to invest in the region, we can give them sensible advice on where the pockets of opportunity exist and where the pockets of need exist. And hopefully then a more calculated way of being able to direct their efforts to develop in areas that aren't going to have significant impact on the region. To the point about the Airbnb, I'm glad you raised that, because we had an excellent group of representatives from Tamborine Mountain approved B&B operators raised with us several years ago, and I think you'd be familiar with the short-term accommodation report that was presented to our Scenic Rim Tourist Advisory Committee. Recently, our planning and development team, along with our compliance team, worked with economic development and have introduced a new program of looking at safety compliance and auditing operators right across the region to identify those that are perhaps not properly approved, that are not appropriately compliant, that might have concerns around safety and risk to patrons. And so that is working in tandem with this team here. And this audit will give us a sensible benchmark and baseline for us to look at future development that is required across the region. And it's not necessarily required to accommodate future growth. It's required to accommodate current demand that we're already experiencing. And I recall back many years ago when I was in Brisbane City Council in the 90s, we were working with our tourism leads then, with Tourism and Events Queensland, looking at an investment attraction strategy around accommodation, and that document put in place has borne out to try and manage the growth more efficiently and sustainably. That is the ultimate goal of this strategy.
Thank you. Councillor McConnell, you have another question?
Thank you. Through the chair, back to the GM. In relation to nature-based tourism and its broad-based and the planning scheme, is there anything in the planning scheme that prevents someone putting in an application for nature-based tourism in a residential area?
I'd rather not take hypothetical questions, if you wouldn't mind, Councillor. I think
Okay, I'll change my question.
Okay.
Is there areas within the planning scheme that identify suitable areas for tourism?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Hay?
I refer back to page 172 of the strategy. It mentions visitor overcrowding and that some areas are being loved to death with visitor overcrowding at Tamborine Mountain frustrating local communities. And at page 175 there's a new word, over-tourism. I'm concerned that the strategy doesn't cover preventative measures, and so a question for through the chair to the GM, what preventative measures can be put in place to make sure that the disconnect between the strategy and the current planning scheme adequately protect residential areas from overdevelopment and being loved to death by tourists?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Hay. Probably there's some assumptions in that question, but I think primarily the whole basis of this strategy is, as I've mentioned several times now, is to create an environment where we can manage sustainably the growth of the region. The perception of disconnect between the planning scheme and this strategy is, as I outlined earlier, fundamental to the teams that are working collaboratively on the implementation of this. And it may be that if there's any inadequacies that are identified in the planning scheme throughout the process, that would be subject to a further amendment that would come back through the council for future consideration. So it's not a perfect science, either in both the strategy or what was adopted by the planning scheme at that point in time. And we know that many things have moved on in the years since its adoption in 2020. And as you would also be aware, we're going through the Shaping SEQ plan review at the moment, and officers are working on that as well. So it gives us a golden opportunity to look at that overlay as well, because the pressure of growth that is presented through that process and the expectation on this council is something that we need to deal with, not just in relation to tourism.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? I do have one that you may not be able to answer. I've heard the comment a few times about this a perception of a conflict between nature-based tourism operators and ratepayers. Is there any indication that the operators are not local ratepayers?
No, all local tourism operators are current ratepayers of this region. I do acknowledge the points that were made by Councillor Hay, that there are some ratepayers who have chosen to step in to operating in a tourism business, and that's why we have the compliance program in place, and our aim would be to provide guidance and assistance for all of those ratepayers to ensure they are paying the correct amount of rates for the way in which they use the property that they reside or work or live or play in.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll get the GM to introduce the recommendations, please.
Thank you, councillors. Before you today, for your consideration, is a recommendation that 1, Council adopt the Scenic Rim Nature-Based Tourism Strategy 2022 to 2023.
2032.
That's an error.
2032.
Sorry, there is an error. It should be 2023 to 2032.
That's what 2020, so I'm trying to clarify because you...
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I was reading it as it was there, Mayor, but it's picked up as an error, so I'll start again. That council adopt the Scenic Rim Nature-Based Tourism Strategy 2033 to 2032.
Sorry, 2023.
Sorry.
Deep breath.
2023 to 2032.
Thank you.
I love these tongue twisters. And approve its publication on council's website. 2, that council produce a limited number of A4 hard copies to be distributed to key stakeholders involved in its development. 3, that council delegate authority to the Chief Executive Officer to make minor grammatical and formatting changes to the Scenic Rim Nature-Based Tourism Strategy, again an error there, 2023 to 2032 if required, and after its adoption and prior to publishing on council's website for public access, noting any such changes will be advised to councillors prior to publishing. 4, that council acknowledge and thank the Australian Government for providing funding under round 3 of the Building Better Regions Fund Community Investment Stream to develop the strategy. And 5, council acknowledge and thank all the businesses, key stakeholders and relevant government agencies for their contributions, which have resulted in development of the Scenic Rim's first nature-based tourism strategy.
Thank you. We have a recommendation. Councillor, I seek a mover. Councillor Enright, thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Councillor McConnell?
Yeah, I think there needs to be discussion around the table in regards to nature-based tourism and the broad base that it actually has out there in relation with the planning scheme and where things can go. As I've said in the chamber a number of times, I've got no problem with someone doing whatever they want on their property. It's until it affects the neighbour. And we seem to have an encroachment within the residential areas, and especially on Tamborine Mountain, but it will get into other areas where nature-based tourism with a view or a couple of fruit trees are being claimed as a tourism business when it's actually a commercial business. It's putting accommodation in a residential area. There are some areas up in Tamborine that I know where there's been accommodation, 4 cabins put on someone's property and doesn't affect any of the neighbours. But then again, we've had a few where I believe it has affected the neighbours, and I just think we either need to properly define nature-based tourism or have a look at the planning scheme where we can enforce stricter controls on where tourism goes in a residential area. That's just, yeah, I think we just need to debate that a bit more.
Councillor, I just would caution, I think there's a confusion in that between this strategy versus the planning scheme in your comment. So we're not debating the planning scheme today. If there's a need for a conversation, then that's a planning scheme. So I think that's, you know, those matters get dealt with on their merit on each case. And if we think there are areas that need to be changed, then that's a planning scheme matter. Versus, so just let's not try to confuse the two issues in today's conversation. That's all I'm saying. If you want discussion.
But you would agree they're interlinked?
Yes.
Councillor, everything we do in here is interlinked. You can't, and I'm just saying everything we do has a link to just about everything we touch has a link to the planning scheme or to another policy setting. We don't try to work through all of those aspects. If we believe there are issues to call out, then we call them out to be dealt with properly in the consideration of the planning scheme. You know, not, so I'm just saying we need to deal with the business before us today rather than the planning scheme, is what I'm saying, just for clarity.
And I'm agreeing, but what I'm saying is that this directly affects the way it's written, how things are enforced, because it says in the strategy what is nature-based tourism, and I think around the table we need to have a look at probably better defining nature-based tourism more than in the document, so that people are aware. It just seems to be a little bit broad-based in there. that could allow people to think that it's okay. And so that's, yeah, I just think everything's linked back to the planning scheme and all that sort of stuff, but, you know, we can't just see this in isolation. It's linked to everything. So we should be able to discuss everything that this is linked to ensure that we have the proper debate.
Councillor Hay, can you just switch off for a moment so the GM has a chance to respond to that?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Your message is loud and clear. I'll take all of that on board, and we will follow through, you know, your thought patterns, where you're going with that, and we will come back and have those other discussions. And the definitions that are presented in that are acceptable standard definitions, and we will work with our colleagues in the planning scheme area to ensure there is not a disconnect.
Just to clarify that before I go to Councillor Hay, this piece that keeps coming back about the definition, my read of this is those are standard industry definitions. They're not council created definitions. So if we start deviating away from that, we create ourselves as an anomaly in an industry that we are referenced into quite broadly.
The definition for nature-based tourism is Queensland's definition as defined by Tourism Events Queensland. The definition of Ecotourism Australia is Ecotourism Australia's, which is developed in consultation with the international bodies that they work with. And the definition of adventure tourism is the Adventure Travel Trade Association, which again is an international body.
Thank you. Councillor McConnell, I'm going to ask you to wait, please. Councillor Hayes
Just
is waiting.
Well, that was from my question, Mr. Mayor.
Righto, sorry. Oh, well, that was from mine, actually. But anyway, go ahead.
Just through the chair to the GM then, if you could just confirm that every definition in all our strategies are not ours, but linked from a international definition. Do we come up with our own?
They are in
Not
this,
just here, but any document.
Oh,
So we
I
don't
can't
use
give you
our own definitions?
well, I can't give a blanket judgment on that today, because the definitions, it depends on, that's a very broad question, Councillor. I mean, I think that
My question was
it's just
that
too broad to give
yeah.
you a yes/no answer here today. I think you understand that.
Yeah, thank you.
Just before so Councillor Hay, I'll come back to that. But Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to state that I agree entirely with Councillor McConnell's earlier comments, and at the moment I would need to invoke the precautionary principle, and I'm not in favour of the strategy as it stands, in that it doesn't indicate enough protections over the next 10 years for the majority of the ratepayers in the Scenic Rim who are residential rather than business based.
Thank you for that comment. Can I just return, GM, is it reasonable to observe that where there are relevant definitions, particularly in the context of the industry sector that we're looking at, that it's important to try to align to those so that you can have meaningful conversation both at state and federal level, both with governments and with the bodies that manage those sectors?
Yes, that's correct. So in the same way that the agribusiness and agritourism strategy has industry standard definitions included in it as one example.
Thank you. Other questions? Other discussion, councillors? And CK.
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor, if I may. Councillors, just be aware at some point in time, Council obviously endorsed the creation of this strategy, otherwise the funding application wouldn't have gone through. So please keep that in mind, that there is a responsibility there to provide a document of sorts or a strategy back to the federal government. That was through the Building Better Regions funding. So at some point in time, obviously I wasn't here, but at some point in time around this table, there was agreement to proceed with this, and this has now come off that.
Thank you, CEO. I seek a seconder. Councillor West, thank you. Councillor Knight, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I will speak to this motion. This is an excellent strategy that deals with the opportunities and the challenges. Tourism is an important sector in our region. I'm delighted to see that the focus is on increased commercial yield from visitors, not by increasing numbers, and I think that will allay some of the concerns. I see the opportunities are about the flow-ons to local businesses, the accommodation providers, and the opportunities for visitors and residents of our region to enjoy more of our region.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone seeking to speak additionally? Councillor McConnell.
I will speak additionally. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I will support the motion, given the GM's comments that we will be looking at the planning scheme. I think a tightening of the planning scheme to enable the effective implementation of this strategy will greatly help the tourism operators, as well as the residents that where applications are made within a residential area can be properly assessed. I do believe that I think Councillor Enright made something about a greater yield, not more people, but I don't think that's going to be relevant because there's an additional population boom within the southeast, which will guarantee there will be additional tourists in our area, and we are primarily the premier tourism place within the southeast, and I think we are going to have a look at that. It's going to be more than just a greater yield. We are going to get more residents, more tourism coming out this way. With I think it was 900,000 coming in the southeast over the next 20 years. So there will be an increase there. I think a tightening of the planning scheme to but to better protect residential areas is a must to go hand in hand with this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chalk.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I will speak additionally to this. I've got some concerns about the broad base of this strategy. I think it speaks to nearly all tourism, and I thought we were trying to move in a different direction and focus on something a little bit different in this strategy, but I'm not sure that it does that. Also concerned about the budget impacts of council. We've seen over the course of this term that we really struggle to capture revenue from these types of things. I know we charge these guys rates, but they're a very small percentage of our rate base. If I really truly represented my community, the majority of my community, I would have to vote no to this. I just don't know whether some of this comes from sometimes. The livability of our region is really at risk sometimes, and we try to see beyond that and see the bigger picture, see the opportunity that it provides, but there also is some really worrying factors out there that the rate base has got to keep up with the infrastructure that council's got to look after, which we struggle to do, and we've got to protect the livability of this area as well. So managing all that is difficult, and I would like to see further refinement of the strategy to address a lot of these issues, and hope that they can be undertaken over the course of the next few months or years. 2023 to 32 is a long strategy. It's a long period of time. Whatever wheels we put in motion now will have long-lasting effects. So it really does worry me implementing this again without really nutting out some of the finer details. But I probably will support it. But I wanted my opinion put forward that there is worrying things in this as well. So thank you.
Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I certainly hear what has been said by some of my fellow councillors and understand their concerns. For me, excuse me, this is the first initial strategy that we have had for nature-based tourism, and so I welcome it. It's been funded from outside sources, and it is about sustainable tourism. It's a strategy to highlight the beautiful area that we live in, and that's why we're called the Scenic Rim, because we have the World Heritage listed national parks around us. But it is also about ensuring that we protect and appreciate these natural assets into the future. It's not about holus bolus type of of visitation. Certainly in the area that I represent, there are a lot of small businesses in this area. A lot of them have been agricultural producers who are unable to keep going in that sense, or they've extended their businesses. So for them it is particularly important, and it certainly provides great employment in the area. But I would hope that this strategy would be reviewed, as our strategies are, on a yearly basis, and a report card coming back, so that we have an opportunity to tweak things if we need to. Thank you.
Anyone else seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to comment that our planning section appears to struggle with some of the development applications which are based on nature-based tourism as a category. One's the one that's in court, and I'll leave that one alone, but the other one is the other one that's in Young Street in Councillor McConnell's division. That one's been with the planning section for an extraordinarily long time, and it's a hot potato going backwards and forwards between the developer and council, and we don't seem to be any closer to a resolution. I'm just concerned that by adopting such a lengthy strategy, which goes for 9-10 years, we are going to be enabling the fast tracking of things that we don't fully understand the consequences of, and that's my main concern.
Any other seeking to speak? If not, I will speak in support of this motion. Very clearly, anybody who looks at global trends for spectacular locations, the term over-tourism has been around for quite some time, so it's not a new term to me. And it's largely based on a lack of clarity around strategic context and a focus of that to help manage precincts and to put a plan around providing guidance for the planning of land use applications to better inform how those decisions get made. That's what this strategy helps us do. It provides a guiding light for that. It's interesting, in the discussion day we've talked about, did the operators contribute? Well, I think other strategies we've done around agribusiness, we didn't require financial contribution from the operators because we recognise there are important pillars in our economy that need to be made stronger, supported to be sustainable for future generations. And that's what we've heard in some of the commentary for other matters already today, that our role as a council is to work towards that, providing a guiding light for sustainability. And whenever you put a strategic perspective in place, you then look to ensure that the rest of your systems are guided by that and are able to support it. The notion of having a strategy that lets us seek to have better control, we cannot in a democratic country stop people driving up the road and deciding that they want to all queue up to have a coffee in a particular location. But we can certainly put a guiding light around parts of the sector to give the clarity for those who wish to invest, and also ensure that we're getting the balance right to protect our environment, a balance with the character of our communities, and ensure a sustainable way forward. That's where this strategy positions us. And it does then help us to deal with the balance of livability. But I do agree with Councillor Chalk, the challenge we face because of the structure of our local economy is how do we capture the revenue for what is a very large asset base to maintain for people to access locations, whether that's for agriculture or for tourism. The challenge is we have a lot of infrastructure to maintain to get access to our remote locations, which make us special. We haven't got the answer to that one yet, I'm sorry, Councillor. Monday we might. But I commend the motion. Councillor Enright, you wish to close? Okay, we put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried.
Division, please, Mr Mayor.
Division, those in favour, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and Mayor against Division 1. Councillors, we'll adjourn there. Thank you very much for your work in this endeavour. I'm conscious we had a grant to discharge and a time frame to execute. The level of work that's been done in the preparation of this was quite clear in the report. Thank you. Thank you to the others involved. And at that, I will adjourn at 10:45. I just had to speak for a moment to click the 10:45. And we will return at 11:10, please. Thank you. Welcome back, councillors, executive, and those joining us in the digital gallery, noting that no one has returned for the physical gallery. We move to item 10.5 of today's agenda on page 191. GM, we're once again in your hands for an introduction.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Item 10.5 is the MCU 21/05/8 development permit for a material change of use for a food establishment reception centre industry low impact service at 5 Roxbury Street, Canungra. I've got some information I'll provide prior to handing over to Frank, the team leader of development assessment, who's going to just take us through a little bit of the assessment and the background of the basis of the recommendation today. As you'll be aware, council is in receipt of an application for development permit for material change of use, as I just said. The application is being assessed against the Beaudesert Shire Planning Scheme 2007 and is an impact accessible application as the site is located in Canungra Township Zone residential precinct. The applicant is seeking to establish a mixed commercial low impact service industry centre. Plans are provided in the report at attachment 1. In particular, they're looking to provide a restaurant/function/showroom, car parking, 11 single-storey mixed-use tenancies, 4 double-storey mixed-use tenancies for retail, i.e. shop or food establishment, and restrooms, and a secondary car park located on the northern side of Finch Road with a single-storey mixed use. The total proposed gross floor area of the overall development is 2,049.7 square metres with a total 100 on-site parking spaces. The proposed development straddles Roxburgh Street, with the proposed development on northern side being 6 commercial industry tenancies totalling 409.5 square metre GFA with 33 parking spaces. Access to these being from the driveway directly accessing the Finch Road roundabout. The development on the southern side of Roxburgh Street, Site A, includes 9 proposed commercial industry tenancies being 1 and 2 storey, abutting the sewage treatment plant to the northeast. The restaurant function showroom is proposed for the centre on the site and 4 retail tenancy food establishments on the southern side. As the total GFA of Site A is 1,642.2 square metres with 67 parking spaces accessed off Roxburgh Street. As I mentioned earlier, we'd like to ask Frank Andrews, Team Leader of Development Assessment, to briefly go through the assessment process and the basis for the recommendation for your consideration today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Good morning, councillors, through the chair. As Deborah introduced, this report is for a material change of use application for food establishment, reception centre, low impact and service industry and shop at 5 Roxburgh Street, Canungra. As previously mentioned, the proposed development is located within the residential precinct of the Canungra Township Zone under the superseded 2007 Beaudesert Planning Scheme. For context, under the current planning scheme, the site is located within the limited development zone. The application was deemed accepted on the 25th of May 2021 and council had agreed to assess the application against the superseded planning provisions. An information request was sent to the applicant on 25th of June 2021. The applicant responded on 26th of September 2022. So we're talking 15 months for the applicant to get back to us. Now, as discussed, it's a fairly significantly scaled development. There's over 2,000 square metres of gross floor area and 100 on-site parking spaces. Now, if I could direct you to page 222, if we could, you'll see that the site is in very close proximity to the Canungra sewage treatment plant. In fact, it basically abuts with it. And the entire development is located within the buffer zone as indicated in an overlay in the 2000 scheme. While this particular map shows a buffer area under the current scheme, under section 45(5)(b) of the Planning Act, assessment managers can consider other material or relevant matters as relevant matters. And in this case, we have basically considered the current scheme. As you can see, the entire proposed development is located within this buffer. I must note the difference in the buffer area between the current and the superseded scheme is negligible. The applicant did submit an odour report with the application. However, council commissioned a peer review of this odour report because obviously it dealt with very technical matters. The applicant did respond to the matters raised in this peer review in their information request. Now, Urban Utilities, which run the sewage treatment plant, provided third-party advice and indicated there was some concern about the application, in particular with respect to reverse amenity issues. They were also a properly made submitter. Now, if I could also now direct you to page 216. The application was publicly notified for 15 days from the 6th to the 27th of October last year. There were 79 properly made submissions. Most submissions were from adjoining and nearby residents. And as you can see from that plan, basically the majority of nearby residents have provided submissions, and all of them, opposing the development. The matters that the submissions in summary were that they had concerns about increases in traffic and on-street parking. There were concerns about amenity impacts from the development due to noise, odour and light emissions. There were concerns with respect to safety due to increased traffic and risk of crime. Most submitters indicated the inappropriateness of the location due to proximity to the sewage treatment plant. There was also, the community seemed to have an expectation that the area was to remain open space, and there were concerns about the impact on Canungra Creek and local wildlife. Upon receipt and review of the relevant material, council officers have recommended refusal of the application based on the following grounds. Firstly, the use is inconsistent with the zone. It is a proposed out-of-centre development, and the applicant has not successfully demonstrated overwhelming economic need. The proposed use will result in development that is not consistent with the scale, form and intensity of development which is intended for the residential precinct of the Canungra Township Zone, and would not accord with the reasonable expectations of the residents of the zone as demonstrated by the large number of submissions. The overall impact of such a development, including visual impact, light, noise and traffic impacts in a residential area, would far exceed the expectation for development and built form that would reasonably be expected in this zone and precinct. And finally, the proximity to a sewage treatment plant risks reverse amenity issues and safety and amenity of visitors and employees of the proposed development. The submitted material, including the applicant's response to the peer review, has not adequately demonstrated these matters have been sufficiently addressed. In conclusion, officers consider the above-mentioned conflicts to be substantial in nature, and there are no development conditions which could be imposed to overcome these conflicts. The application material has not demonstrated grounds which would warrant an approval despite the conflicts with the planning scheme. Furthermore, it is the officer's opinion there are no other relevant matters that could be introduced by the applicant in favour of an approval. As such, council officers recommend refusal of the application for the reasons outlined in the report's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, points for clarification to the report first. Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the officers, I just wondered if you might just elaborate just a little more on the odour report, please, and the peer review especially. Just the major points that came out of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, well, the applicant submitted an odour report. Now, obviously, it deals with an odour report. There's obviously some very technical matters which are sort of, I guess, beyond sort of the general sort of, I guess, background of council officers. So we engaged an external odour consultant to review it, and they provide some recommendations in a report that we received on the 3rd of November 2021. In summary, basically, they had some issues with some of the assumptions of their initial odour report and also some of the methodology they used. So basically, they sought some, basically further studies and some further clarification of some of the matters. Now, this report was submitted to the applicant, and they responded to the matters raised in this peer review report within within their overall response to the information request back in September last year. We reviewed that reviewed report. We consider that we chose not to do another peer review. We felt it was clear enough from the response that they hadn't fully addressed the matters that were raised in that peer review report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? If not, thank you. We move forward. Recommendation, please. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Before you for your consideration is a recommendation that 1, Council note the report and assessment of MCU 21/058 development permit for material change of use for a flood establishment, reception centre, industry, low impact service at 5 Roxburgh Street, Canungra. 2, that Council resolve to refuse development application MCU 21/058 for the following reasons. Excuse me. A, the proposed development conflicts with the following provisions of the relevant local planning instrument, being the Bow Desert Shire Planning Scheme 2007. 1, Section 2.1.3 Desired Environmental Outcomes 2.12P 83C. 2, Strategic Framework 2.2.1 1, 2.212 3, Canungra Township. I'm loving my recommendations. Canungra Township Code Table 3.8.11. Specific outcomes SO1, SO3, SO5, SO7, SO21, SO22, SO30, SO32, SO34, SO40, and SO45. 4, Canungra Township Zone Code Table 3.8.13, specific outcomes and prescribed solutions for the residential precinct, specific outcomes SO1 and SO8. 5, I think I said 4, did I say 4 the last one?
Yes, you did.
I don't know.
Yep, you're on 5.
Canungra Township Code Table 3.810, overall outcomes 001, 002, 003, 006, 008, 0020, 0025, 0027, 0029, 0037, 0047 and 0058. 6, Parking and Serving Code Table 5.3.16, specific outcomes SO1. 7, Development Constraints Overlay, specific outcome SO39. B, the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated any relevant matters warranting approval despite the above-mentioned conflicts. And C, the proposed development could not otherwise be conditioned to achieve compliance with the above-mentioned conflicts.
Thank you. I seek a mover. Councillor West.
Happy to move.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor Hay. Councillor West, do you wish to?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I am happy to move this motion for this report. Quite clearly, the application is not considered to comply with the planning scheme provisions or with the Canungra Town Zone Code. And as the officers have indicated, they're unable to achieve compliance through any of the codes in conflicts. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor Hay.
I'd just like to commend the planning officers who put so much time and effort into such a comprehensive report and an easily understandable recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 10.6, and thank you, gentlemen, for assisting us today. We move to item 10.6 on page 273 of today's agenda, and we ask the General Manager, Asset and Environmental Sustainability, to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, councillors, executive, advisor, officers and those listening in online. Item 10.6 deals with waste asset development operations and service expression of interest. As you would be aware, under our Waste Management and Resource Recovery Strategy 2021-2026, the strategy outlines that we need to certainly look at ways to manage our waste more efficiently and effectively into the future. As part of this, we identified the need to go to market to understand what is actually out there that could assist us in this task. So we certainly had previous reports that have outlined the progress. This report basically is here to advise you that we're ready to press the button on that EOI that will be going out tomorrow.
Thank you, GM. Councillors, we've had a fair bit of discussion on this. Any additional questions? Need clarity to what's before you today? If not, I'll ask you to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council note the progress on the expression of interest for waste and asset development operations and services, particularly that it is scheduled to be released to the public on 19 April 2023 and to close on 26 May 2023.
Seeker mover. Councillor Enright, thank you. Any further questions? Any additional discussion? I'll just add a small amount of discussion. This is an important piece of work. It's great that we're at this point. We have a clear obligation expected of us by our community, but equally importantly by the state, to get moving on addressing this challenge. It's a sector that has a really rapidly changing landscape of opportunities to not just keep things out of landfill, but actually find a way to get them back to the highest and best value contribution to the sustainability of society in general. And this is an exciting piece of work that's been thoughtfully put together, and it will be exciting equally to then see the responses that come, noting that we are hopeful to get a wide range both from community as well as from the commercial sector in thinking about this challenge. Any other discussion? Not. Seeker seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor Enright, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with those comments. This is an exciting milestone for the region. I think we all have to play a part in the way that we deal with waste into the future, and I see that this provides opportunities for us to work toward a much better sustainable future. I'd like to congratulate and thank the officers for the work in getting it to this stage. It's a great effort to get it to this stage, and we look forward to the next stages as they unfold.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Those against?
Mr Mayor, I need to abstain because I'm not sufficiently across this agenda item to vote.
That's okay.
Thank you.
We note the abstinence, which will show as an against, but the motion's carried. Thank you. We move to item 10.7 on page 277. Thank you for your support and your cheerful disposition with the excitement of what lies before you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Item 10.7 deals with the road naming of two unnamed roads, one located at Bromelton and one located at Warralong. Within the report, you'll see the descriptions of where both roads are located, and also I can draw your attention to the fact that Council followed, or Council officers followed Council's naming of roads and places policy when considering how to deal with this approach from residents within that area. I've also got Scott Osmond, Manager of Maintenance and Operations, here to answer any detailed questions if they are required to be answered.
Councillors, any questions for clarity to what's laid out before you? Not? Sounds like we can move forward with the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that one, Council name the unnamed road off Upper Allen Creek Road, Bromelton, which commences approximately 5 kilometres along Upper Allen Creek Road from its intersection with Beaudesert Boona Road as Belugan Road, and 2, the council name the unnamed road off Beaudesert Boona Road, Wyalong, which commences approximately 2.5 kilometres northwest of the intersection of Wyalong Dam Access Road and Beaudesert Boona Road as Crows Creek Road.
Seeker mover, Councillor Enright. Further questions? Any discussion? Seeker seconder, Councillor McConnell. Wish to speak, Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank the officers for the work through these two processes. I've been involved in one of them in some time ago, and it's a delight to see it come through to be endorsed by Council and see the creation of 2 new roads in our region, Belugan Road and Crows Creek Road.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 10.8 on page 282 of today's report. And again, we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 10.8 deals with a required revision of the local government infrastructure plan regarding public parks and land for community facilities. When we look at the amount of land that was allocated within the local government infrastructure plan that was adopted in 2018, since then there has been a number of developments with regard to council acquiring the Lupton Road area of land for as a regional sporting precinct, as well as the development of the Spring Creek Master Plan, which has seen the need to make an amendment to the current local government infrastructure plan. Again, I have Scott Osmond, Manager of Maintenance and Operations, who has been working with Mark Lohman with regard to working through this particular report.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions to the report before us today? Points for clarity, Councillor Enright.
Mayor, I wonder if it's possible to bring the LGIP map up onto the screen. Is that possible?
Which attachment? I think just seeking guidance.
192. Yep, 292. Yep.
So
Oh, well, you can start with that and I'll go back to the next one to, yeah.
sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, okay. So if we can go to 292, just to understand the layers of the LGIP. So with the intent to remove NS2 and NS3, it's probably not quite clear. There's something that says C2, but I think that's NC2 perhaps, which I believe is community.
Just so what's
yep. The question is, okay, with the removal of NS2, is it, the way I'm visualising that is that layers? Are they layers? So you remove NS2, that then leaves NC2 as the covering that whole footprint? Is that the correct way of interpreting the map?
Can you provide guidance?
Yeah, so the removal of NS2, NC2 doesn't become bigger. So NC2 stays along the creek bank. The removal of NS2 basically that's classified as a sports park. So what we're doing is, because council already owns that portion of land, and we've got that earmarked as a recreation, passive recreation park with informal sporting infrastructure. So the removal of NS2 just takes it away from being a designated sporting facility. So it'd still be there for recreational use. But NC2 doesn't grow, no.
Then my question probably is, should that be amended so that NC2, which I understand is community, and NR3 is recreation, should that then be expanded to cover that footprint that's currently NS2? And
So,
all this will become clear when the LGIP is reviewed. So for the purpose of this report, it's de-designating those two NSs to allow for the Lupton Road. All the other categories there will be reviewed as part of the LGIP, which that review is looking to start in the very near future. And so that'll all come into the mix at that stage.
potentially it will be addressed at least on that review.
All parks, all roads, all trunk infrastructure will be addressed with the review of the LGIP.
thank you. Any other question for clarifications, councillors? Councillor McConnell.
Thank you. If we could just go to page 293 and NS4. Is that an extension for Everdell to have additional park there in front of the Villawood, the Euclid estate?
Unfortunately, no. It would be a great outcome if we could expand Everdell to that location, but there is a private property that divides those two locations.
Yep.
Yeah, so no, they would be two separate.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's why that's why we thought the requirement to remove NS4, because that portion's already served by Everdell, but we will retain NS5, which is proposed future sporting fields over on Fields Road.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for those clarifications. Further questions? Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, then NR8 remains, and what does NR8 designate?
NR8 is a district recreational park. So with any development in that area, they'll be required to provide a park to council standard of a district recreational park. Yeah, so where that's a proposed location, but when they actually do the development application, it'll include the exact location of where NR8 would be located.
So there is an application for reconfiguration of lot for that block of land, and we're currently in negotiations in regard to where parks and the like will be located.
Thank you. Further clarifications? If not, Jim, I'll get you to introduce the recommendation for this item.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation for this item is that Council acknowledge A, the current local government infrastructure plan included as Part 4 of the Scenic Rim Scenic Rim Planning Scheme 2020 requires revision in light of changed circumstances since the local government infrastructure plan was prepared, affecting the local government area. B, the local government infrastructure plan currently identifies new sports parks for Badesett being local government infrastructure plan items NS2, NS3 in brackets Spring Creek Precinct, NS4 Gleneagle, and NS5 Thursdale. And C, since the development of the local government infrastructure plan, a strategic purchase of land for the delivery of the Lupton Road Sporting Precinct has been made. The standard of service delivered by this facility will be superior outcome to that anticipated by the local government infrastructure plan. there are also financial and operational advantages that will arise from the delivery of this facility. D, Council has undertaken the Spring Creek Precinct Master Plan, which identifies that the area will be developed largely for recreational and informal sporting activities, superseding the local government infrastructure plan intent to provide new sports parks, NS2 and NS3 in this locality. And E, the provisions governing the preparation and implementation of local government infrastructure plan recognise that alternative infrastructure to that identified in a local government infrastructure plan may be provided where it provides a similar level of service. 2, Council resolved to deliver the premier sporting facility located at Lupton Road, Mount Lindsay Highway, but as it in lieu of delivery of the local government infrastructure plan items NS2, NS3 and NS4. And 3, as part of the forthcoming review of the local government infrastructure plan, the plan for trunk infrastructure in respect for public parks and land for community facilities be revised accordingly.
Thank you. I seek a mover. Councillor Enright, thank you. Further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor West, thank you. Councillor Enright, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is another exciting milestone, recognising the future investment in our sporting precincts in the main area of Beaudesert and surrounds. It's certainly acknowledging the opportunities that exist with Lupton Road, but it also acknowledges that we can't be duplicating these facilities in similar areas of our town, and it makes sense to remove those areas that have been previously designated as sporting precincts be removed to enable the focus on Lupton Road into the future.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Go over the page to item 10.9. Thank you, gentlemen, for assisting us today. We turn to the GM Council Sustainability for item 10.9, page 294 of your reports, councillors.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good morning, Mr Mayor, councillors and all other attendees in the chambers today, as well as those listening into the digital broadcast. 10.9 today is fairly straightforward, and I take the report as being read. It also does provide a copy of the policy for reference, and the rationale is outlined in the report. Part of Council's ongoing review of policies under our policy review framework has identified that the intent of the current Common Seal policy is currently being facilitated and administrated by the CEO adequately. We'll note that rescinding it today doesn't eliminate the Common Seal itself. It just allows for a more effective approach in ensuring all policies are reviewed and up to date by allowing the focus on the key policies in the framework and removing irrelevant, outdated legacy policies. That's all I have to provide as part of this report. It's fairly straightforward, and it's just sort of it's an administrative process. It's currently a council policy. To remove a policy requires consideration by council to rescind it.
Thank you. Any questions for clarity, councillors? Councillor McConnell?
Just a quick one through the chair to the CEO. When was the last time we actually used the Common Seal? You may have to go to one of the GMs, I suppose.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Deputy, not in my time, so I'll go through the General Manager.
I'll use the same approach, not in my time in the last 4 or 5 years either.
Okay.
It's a very rarely used. It is there. No.
So I have a reliable source who's been around a little longer, who, not too much longer, just a little longer, who suggests that can recall it only ever being used once. So that indicates how out of date perhaps having it is.
Thank you.
No further questions, or ask you to introduce the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, the recommendation for item 10.9 is that Council rescind Council Policy Common Seal, which was adopted on 24 May 2016.
I seek a mover. Councillor McInnes, thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Any additional discussion? Seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk. Councillor McGuinness, you wish to speak? No? Righto, thank you. Anyone seeking leave to speak? Okay, no one seeking leave to speak. We put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 10.10, page 298. GM, we're again in your hands for the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10.10 is the Council Monthly Financial Report for March 2023. At the previous meeting, we tabled the February report, and I guess I will just highlight some of the key differentiations from the month on end. We've seen now the incorporation of the December budget review into the comparable columns. I will note that as part of the executive summary on page 301, the previous month, a bit of a correction as part of the December budget review. We were reporting a $3.7 million operating surplus. There's been a bit of a correction now in the March, and that's reduced down to 2.6. We are still continuing to review the current budget, and we will be undertaking a March budget review. There's still one of the key components in there is still we're seeing results as of a tightness of the employment market. Some of the positions that were hopeful to be filled in those previous few months following the December budget review have continued to remain vacant, and we will review those again accordingly to forecast out the expected costings as to 30th of June 2023. I will note also there's we're seeing continued positive trends in association with our fees and charges, and that includes around the activities, again, positive around the development assessment and building and property related revenue, plumbing certifications, even the refuse tipping fees. And similarly, we're seeing with the increase in the cash rate that we're getting a slightly higher than anticipated income as associated with interest on investments. Similarly, on that page, I will note that as you know, with the clear weather and the ability to undertake further works, we have seen at the a bit of a catch up with the capital expenditure, where as of February we were reporting $11.258 million behind lower than expectations, and we're now showing we've caught up a little bit of ground. We're showing a $10.593 million behind expectations. The only other points from the March report, Mr. Mayor, is on page 309 of the agenda. As I mentioned before, we're seeing the weighted average and the target interest rate increased. These have gone up a little bit following the recent announcements by the Reserve Bank Governor. So we're now seeing a weighted average interest rate of 3.99% on council investments. Also just mindful that whilst we do have some of that dollars sitting in the bank account, again, as I pointed out the previous month, around the componentisations of those and those balances that are restricted and are not free cash or such. The next page, 310. It's good to see the month on month we're still continuing a focus on directing some of our expenditure where possible on local suppliers, and we're maintaining a 30% balance through until the 31st of March. $21 million of contestable expenditure with local businesses out of a total 69.6 million. They were the key points I had highlighted, Mr. Mayor. Certainly open to any other queries from the floor.
Thank you, GM. Councillors, any points for clarification of this report? Councillor Hay.
Through the Mayor to the GM, on page 307 under section 6, proceeds from asset sales, as a newcomer, could I ask what it was that we sold in the way of property?
Sorry, just going up to the page.
I don't think we have.
So part of that component, I don't know the individual properties themselves, but we do have budgeted for, as part of fleet trades, as well as any land sales that we have budgeted for. But I will provide over to Chris Gray, General Manager, Asset and Environmental Sustainability. He might have further details around the individual transactions.
Thank you for the question, through the Mayor. There are a number of items that are identified in this area, and as my colleague outlined, some relate to the sale of plant. As you may be aware, and I'm sure you are, with regard to the supply chain issues we're currently seeing, we're not realising the delivery of plant as quickly, and as such we've seen a slowing in the return from sales of surplus plant. At the same time also, we nominate within this area the sales of specific identified land that are surplus to our needs, and in there also is identified the Bay Desert Enterprise Precinct, which unfortunately has been delayed in its finalisation, and is highly likely, if not certain, that we won't actually see any monies returned for sale of land at that location for this budget period or this financial year.
Thank you.
Councillor, just a microphone, please. Just for clarification, there have been no property sales in this financial year.
At this stage, that's correct.
At this stage,
yes.
that's correct. So, thanks for that clarification. Any other points, councillors? If not, I'll ask you to introduce the...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation for item 10.10 today is that council receive the unaudited financial statements for the period ended 31 March 2023 for the financial year 2022-2023.
Seeker mover. Councillor Chalk. Any further questions, councillors? Sorry, Councillor McInnes.
Yes, Mayor, if I could ask through you to the GM, and we've focused for some time on the amount of money spent locally. Given that there's a figure in my mind that there's probably 30 to 40% that we have big expenditure out of the area that no one in the area provides. I just wonder whether that isn't more relevant on, I'm not just sure what terminology we can use, but yeah, I'm keen to know how much are we missing out of the area here that we could actually be doing. There's quite a bit of that 70% that we don't spend. Yeah, that there's no way that we could spend that.
I will start by yes, I do. Thank you for the question, Councillor McGuinness. I guess I will start the amount that we're reporting there, the 69.5, isn't a total expenditure. That's been normalised to only capture what's potentially contestable. So your likes of expenditure with your superannuation, your Telstra, your insurance, they've all been taken. They've been removed, and this is really what we call contestable. Now, we don't have all the supplies, but there could be a potential for those supplies to be cohabitated within the scenic rim. But at this stage, there's not. The only ones that we've taken out are your ATO, where we're still required to do payments for them by the credit system. There's no way that that's going to be affected. So yeah, we in a way we sort of normalise it. If that's what and obviously part of our mandate as provided for is to continue to drive what the opportunities are to try and work with those, and through the regional prosperity teams try and develop those opportunities and identify those opportunities where possible.
Can I ask a supplementary to that? Because I've asked this question heaps of times in various ways. To Councillor McInnes's point, as you're looking at that number today, we're not saying there's an operator in the region who has that capacity that we've bypassed. We're saying there could be someone developed in the region. That's what your definition of contestable is?
That's correct.
Then my question is, what's the process for building that conversation with that community for them to recognise that opportunity?
I guess, working with the regional prosperity teams, building capacity with those, identifying where those opportunities are, certainly highlighting one of the key things that we're working with the incoming procurement coordinator is outlining our council's own procurement plan, what we intend to purchase throughout the year, and that includes working with the local suppliers to identify that. Certainly, there's a move by Local Buy at the moment where those established panels, and they're going out and through council, we're raising that activation, raising that awareness so that they can apply and be part of those Local Buy contracts, so that not only doing business with the Scenic Rim, but effectively allow business with all 77 councils within Queensland through those Local Buy contracts.
Thank you. Perhaps for another day, CEO, worth a conversation at some point to understand what are the impediments for those local businesses taking up that opportunity. Is it their capacity? Is it lack of understanding? Or are they fully consumed with other things and don't have the capacity, in which case they're not truly able to contest?
Through Mr Mayor, just asking the General Manager of Sustainability, is it likely we will host a Local Buy event to help businesses better understand how they can participate in the Local Buy process?
That is correct, CEO. Additionally, through Deborah's team with the Regional Prosperity, there's a body of work with the Local Business Month, Small Business Month, to try and raise the awareness and where they can get activation.
Through Mr Mayor, have we scheduled a date with Local Buy yet?
26th of May.
Thank you.
25th of May.
Thank you. That's some of the clarification. I look forward to the learnings from that process. Thank you. Councillor McGuinness, does that help expand it? Thank you. Where am I? No other questions. Looking for a seconder. Councillor West, thank you. Wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that congratulate the staff for their reporting. I think it's been gradual improvement over my time here in council so far. The report's getting easier and easier to read and providing more to the point information for councillors and the public to see the position we are in financially. So I thank the staff for their work and their continuous thought in this. Their continuous thought around how they're reporting to us. So thank you, and I endorse the report.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? Put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 10.11 on page 312. Again, GM, we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.11 is the Queensland Treasury Corporation 2023 Credit Review. I'm really grateful today to be formally tabling this matter. This process, as outlined in the report, is a necessary one for council, given that council has a book value amount of $43 million in borrowings, and as such, council is classed as a T2 organisation required to undertake the credit review every 2 years. The credit review provides an opportunity for council's financing partner, Queensland Treasury Corporation, to undertake a review on a multitude of internal and external factors that could impact the going concerns of council, and it provides ensuring that at a point in time the assessment of council provides a necessary review and observations in order for council to have a level of assurance around sustainability, and in particular the long-term financial sustainability when it comes to key decision making. Again, I'll reserve the queries after, but the only other observation to point out that it's given the challenging times over the last few years, ranging from natural disasters and the pandemic, and the impact that these have had and subsequent decisions have had on council's finances, it is pleasing that a sound rating has been maintained. And whilst a sound doesn't necessarily sound overly that pleasing, the majority of councils are within that position. There's not a lot of other councils within the above. There's probably a number of councils that are below that rating. So it's good, prudent financial management and decision making by council is maintaining that level of financial sustainability throughout.
Thank you. Councillors, questions for clarification to the report? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the General Manager. I just wonder for those who are listening at home, Oliver, or GM, sorry, if you might just like to elaborate a little more on the credit rating, what it actually means in terms of Queensland Treasury. What sound? Yeah, sound? The developing outlook.
I can read the definition, but I guess I'll paraphrase a little bit. I guess the sound is rated that council is able to meet its financial commitments in the short, medium, and long term. I guess we do have some cushioning around some vulnerable aspects and shocks, what they call shocks. But generally, as a going concerns, we've got the necessary income to be able to service our necessary outgoings. The fact that a percentage of our income is in around our own income is 70%, unlike some other councils where they're 70% reliant on external funding. Council is well positioned to be able to maintain that own source income.
Thank you.
It's just in developing as well, if you might as well, or was it all wrapped into one?
Yep. So I guess the developing is and this is the outlook. The developing is certainly an on the fence view of where council is. It's as contained in the letter. There's a number of key points that it's identified that if it doesn't follow through, the observation of QTC could be that a downgrade could be down to the negative, which naturally means that if council fulfills those, we're in the positive sector. So developing is depending on a number of key decisions or key actions that were provided to QTC and as contained within the budget and long-term forecasting, including our upcoming budget process. As long as those things are maintained and council maintains a technically developing or technically a positive outlook, if you look at that approach.
Thank you, GM.
Thank you. Any further clarification? Introduce the recommendation, please, GM.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation today for item 10.11 is that council receive the Queensland Treasury Corporation's credit review report and note the results findings.
Seeker mover. Councillor McInnes, thank you. Any further questions? Any additional discussion? Seeker seconder. Councillor McConnell, wish to speak? Councillor McInnes?
No, right, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? Put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We have one item of confidential business, and I'll just clarify that this is an item 11.1 titled Tamboree Mountain Library Outdoor Area. It's been closed under section 254J3C for consideration, and I seek a motion, a mover to move into closed session. Councillor McConnell slightly there. Any question to that? If not, I'll seek a seconder and I'll go to Councillor Hay. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. For those listening in, we will, if we're able to return at 12:30 to close out this item. Otherwise, we will not return until 1 o'clock, 1300, or on the quarter hour thereafter. Thank you. Councillors, I seek a motion to return into open session. Councillor McConnell, Councillor West, those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Welcome back to the gallery. GM, I'll ask you to introduce the recommendation for item 11.1.
Thank you, Chair. Before you for your consideration, councillors, is the recommendation that one, council approve $350,000 for the construction of the outdoor area for the new Tamborine Mountain Library to be approved at this meeting and ratified as part of the March 2023 budget review to ensure the outdoor area is completed simultaneously with the refurbishment of the library. And two, in accordance with clause 22.6.3 of the Scenic Rim Regional Council Standing Orders Procedure CM 03.01 PR.01, Council continue to keep the information contained in this report, including the attachment, as confidential until the new Tamborine Mountain Library is completed and opened.
Seeker mover, Councillor McConnell. Any questions, councillors? Further discussion? Seeker seconder. Councillor West. Councillor McConnell, you wish to speak?
I will, Mr Mayor. I think the completion of the Tamborine Mountain Library as a whole will be a benefit to the residents on the mountain and complete another legacy issue that was kicked down the road by previous councils, and will complete that legacy issue. So I will endorse this this recommendation.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Councillor Chalk.
Yeah, I'm all for the this outdoor area to be completed, but I think we need to get further quotes and get some better value for money.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak for? Councillor West.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor. Just to say, this is probably the not ideal way that we would choose to get this funding, but given the fact that we have a project now that is almost complete, we have the current challenging situation with labour and materials, and I do believe this is a small amount to get a very valuable project for the community of Tamborine Mountain.
Anyone else wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor McInnes.
Yes, Mayor. It's one of these situations where the builder's there, he's doing it. I agree with Councillor Chalk. It's probably dearer than what I think it should be, but he's there. It's going to be completed quickly. From a whole image point of view, I think it's far better if it's done here and now as soon as possible, so the whole project can be completed. So unfortunately, if we had time on our hands and we'd tried to do this a number of months ago, we might have got someone else to do it cheaper, but this is what we're faced with at the present time, and we want it done as quickly as possible to finish it off.
Anyone else wishing to speak additionally? If not, I will speak additionally before I come back to the council to close. I share the frustration expressed around the cost on this, but also accept the wisdom of officers that we're in a very volatile market. It's difficult to get contractors, and the reality is we know all of our costs are beyond what we would otherwise have thought was sensible. So I accept that we do need to spend this, but this is the last in a series of additional expenditures. And I come back to my comments previously when people started talking equity, and I made my comment about performance equity. I'm very mindful that this is now some significant investments in one particular 1% of the footprint of our region. And we have a large distributed community elsewhere, many of whom all they get is the insurance recovery of flood events, which we're gradually trying to deliver. And I'm hoping that the Chamber will be mindful of ensuring we give performance equity to other parts of the region in future funding. Thank you. Back to you, Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with everything around the table. It's not ideal, but we do have to close off a project. I don't think it would probably come back even a little bit more if we went away and came back in 6 months, and then whether we actually get a contractor within the next 6 months. And we've got a great looking library with a substandard entrance and area out the front for people to sit. So again, I feel the frustration, and I was frustrated as well at the cost, but we've got to complete this. We've got a contractor. It'll be done, and we can then move on to the next legacy issue within another area of the council. So thank you.
Motion, those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried.
Division, please, Mr. Mayor.
Division requested. Those in favour, divisions 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and Mayor, and those against Division 5. Brings us to the close of the business meeting today. Thank you, councillors. Thank you to those in the gallery. Thank you, officers, for the preparation for today's meeting. And with that, I call the meeting closed at 12:36. Thank you.